Can we say, like, can we all agree on, like, the coldest take of all time? So it's not even remotely controversial, but I want to pretend that it is with this lead up. One of the best green flags that you can get in an anime is when they can draw black people easily. Like, if you are watching an anime or reading a manga and they can draw a black person, just it's a low bar. I'm not saying it's a high bar. It's a low bar. But if they can do it, then wow, such a hot take. I said it's a cold take. Fire Force is able to draw black people. Yeah, and like lots of sexual assaults. So, you know, a very diversely talented mangaka. We can call it the Mr. Popo test. Yeah. Hunter x Hunter has Canary, and she's iconic. Canary is iconic. I agree. Canary is legit one of the only characters in like a big shonen property that I can think of that is okay. It's crazy because okay, have you noticed this if you watch like anime from the 90s or 80s or whatever? They used to draw everyone in anime or like animate everyone in anime having darker skin. If you look at any anime from like the 90s or 80s, everyone is copper skinned. You see this especially with like One Piece, where in the earlier seasons of One Piece, like Nico Robin, everyone is like orange or some kind of like, you know, ethnically ambiguous. And then you look at modern and everyone's white. And for Canary in Hunter x Hunter, I can't believe it. They did the opposite. There is so much that is wild with how the original Hunter x Hunter show did Canary, from the lips to the fact that she's like a redhead. You know how they make redheads black people in adaptations? They did the opposite with her. I don't know how that's possible. And the skin tone, incredible stuff. Truly incredible. These are the same character. These are the same character, yes. Yeah, it's the reverse of what the Chuds complain about. Why does she have two haircuts? This is the earlier show. This is the later show. The later Hunter x Hunter is peak. Glitch, a lot of Japanese people just don't know that black people exist. I'm just going to be real with you. They don't know. Like, let me put it this way. You know how a bunch of Americans don't know that gypped is a racial slur? Because they don't know about Romani people, really? In Japan, up until relatively recently, that's around the level of cultural awareness that Japanese people had about, like, black people. Like, all of the Western specific knowledge about, like, okay, well, you can't draw their hair like this, and you can't draw their lips like this, and so on, because it's minstrelry or whatever. Like, that was legitimately not known to most Japanese people. And only recently has this become, like, a thing, you know? Oh, so it's not their fault? I mean, I don't want to, like, downplay Japanese racism as a factor, but I mean, I think that is legitimately the case in a lot of specific examples where they legitimately just didn't know, right? Like that is a possibility. The reason they draw blackface because the American, well, yeah, and I mean, there are over the top examples where it's more like deliberate racism. I'm just saying in a lot of cases they legitimately didn't know. I disagree. Vaush, Japan has access to the internet. Listen to the words that come out of my mouth when I talk. I said they didn't, like in the past. Like obviously nowadays, yeah, you have like basically universally accessible global internet shit, okay? But a lot of the anime that we saw back in like the early 2000s was made off of manga that was written back in the 90s and 80s. And like, yeah, obviously there's not as excusable today. Akira Toriyama in the 80s had access to the internet thanks to Future Trunks. That's true. Trunks came back and told him, hey, please don't draw a person with dark skin like that again. You can't do that, man. And Toriyama was like, okay, I will simply go on to become like the most beloved mangaka of all time and then die. Thank you. Here's a character. This doesn't even look like anime. I could be wrong. This 100% looks like a Western show inspired by anime. What is this even from? This is 100% like a Western animated show. Thoughts on making Mr. Popo purple? I mean, apparently Mr. Popo wasn't even meant to be like a black guy. I don't know. I mean, whatever. It's probably just better to avoid the Vox Machina is not anime. Yeah, I can tell from the way this looks. It's very clearly Western. Staff Officer Black of the... Okay. Staff Officer Black. Is that actually his name? Of the Red Ribbon Army? All right, Toriyama. What were you cooking with this one? Toriyama, did you know that your property would become beloved in POC circles in the West? I'm telling you, I'm genuinely telling you. They didn't know. I'm not defending it at all. A lot of it is downstream of like racism that existed broadly in Japanese culture. I'm just saying I think it's far more likely to look at that and go, they didn't know. Because Toriyama didn't like continue drawing black people that way. I genuinely think that in a lot of cases. I just don't want to assume malice when it's so much easier to think like, oh no, they were just like really ignorant back in like the 80s or 70s or whatever. You know, they didn't have the internet. Black people were like a yokai to them. They're like, yeah, man, there are people with really dark skin, and also there are like fat centipedes that live in the woods that feed on the dreams of naughty children, you know? Pre-stream anime stun lock. Never should have taught you guys what a stun lock is, because you didn't internalize the lesson anyway, since they were drawn in the 60s. Yeah, again, like, I don't, there's so much racism in anime. I just feel like it's, you know, you have to be like understanding of where it comes from, I guess. What the does that mean, Pezzlebub? Officer Black redraw? Oh, that looks really good. They redrew the earlier Dragon Ball. Big everyone you idolize is problematic news. Nobuhiro Watsuki was convicted of owning CP in 2017. He only got a slap in the wrist and to this day is employed by Shueisha, best known for Shonen Jump. His series Rurouni Kenshin is turning 30 and 38 industry giants are set to contribute art to the celebration. Okay, I'm going to be real with you guys, and I really hope this doesn't come across as me downplaying this. You do all know how Woody Allen and his legacy get treated in Hollywood, right? Like, I think for the most part, when you see this sort of thing, it's mostly like, oh yeah, Rurouni Kenshin is like a widely celebrated property, and they don't really think of this as an implicit endorsement of pedophilia. I mean, not to say it's good. I'm just saying, I like with Togashi or, you know, whoever else, everyone, Oda doing contributing art. I really don't think they're thinking of it as like, you know, celebrating the man or whatever. That being said, much in the same way that, you know, Hollywood elites are all to varying extents complicit in or at least tolerant of widespread pedophilia in the industry, it makes sense that would also be the case here. What did Woody Allen do? Are you like 5? Well, if you are 5, I guess I'm glad you don't know. Vaush, they had global television. They knew what black people looked like. Black culture was like, no, I don't want to argue this because I don't want to sound like I'm some like anti-woke culture war warrior who's trying to like shout down leftists who say that racism is an issue in anime, because it is an issue in anime. They don't, that's not how like racial tropes work. You're literally growing up in like 1930s, 1940s, 1950s Japan. Your exposure to black people is extremely limited, mostly through like American media. You don't get like a ton of it. And then you see a lot of like implicitly racist or explicitly racist stuff like trickle down through your culture through American occupation. You're not critically like consuming all of it. You're not like, you know, a sociologist or whatever. You just start drawing and you're like, oh yeah, this is how I've seen black people drawn. It's not like they woke up and they're like, I hate black people, time for me to draw them with big red lips. Like, I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying I think it's easier to see this as a product of like its time / cultural distance than it is to think like, oh well, it was them deliberately choosing to depict them in a racist manner. For some of them, I'm sure it is deliberate, right? But I think the lack of cultural context is a more charitable explanation, especially because a lot of those mangaka then went on to make like really good, widely beloved stuff that didn't have those issues, right? Like, do we really think Toriyama drew however this guy looked originally because he was like racist then, but then he grew out of it or something? Or would it make more sense to think like, oh well, he just kind of was a fucking idiot? You know? Again, I'm not like saying it's okay or anything. It's just, you know, just think it's a slightly more, well, that's the redrawn one, Monty. The Watsuki thing happened in 2018, I believe. Well, yeah, but we're talking, yeah, it's a different thing. This reminds me of George Bush doesn't care about black people. Have you ever met a black person? Person whose only exposure to black people in their life is the one famous Kanye quote. Getting a lot of that Kanye quote vibes from this thing involving black people.